Hello, my name is S.K. Williams, and today I would like to talk to you about another atheist visitor to my TuboU channel who helps illustrate my point when it comes to modern-day atheists who go off on how evil religion is and how irrational religion is and how religion is responsible for holding back progress and all that. Because this person responded to a video I had made about other atheists. And because I'm not altogether convinced that Gaggle has lifted all of the restrictions, I shall be using a lot of information, and odd speech patterns now and then, as well as unusual word choices, simply to avoid the ire of Al Gore, who protects his rhythm, if you know what I mean. However, it will not be as onerous as it was during the lead-up to my exile. It will, in fact, be like it was when I was just starting out, with these odd pauses and pronunciations and such like. Though it is ironic, but I will tell you why in a moment. You see, even though I went through a 7-month period in which I did not post any new videos. Videos, of course, kept showing up on my channel if you were watching it, because I had the foresight to schedule several videos in advance in case this happened. Of course, if they just decided to delete my channel, I would have absolutely no recourse, but they just locked me out of my account. As such, whatever videos I had already scheduled would go up, and I had heard of other people having this happen, and my original plan was to load 3 years' worth of content to be released. Most of it was just repetition of videos that I had already done with slight alterations, or else outtakes from certain other videos, such as my Bishop's Bible series. And I didn't quite make the 3-year mark. I made about 9 months worth of content, which turned out to be rather fortuitous because I was returned after only 7 months in exile. So I've been making new content since then. However, my channel remained somewhat active during my absence because of these pre-scheduled videos. But I wasn't able to load new videos or comment on the channels because I was locked out of my channel. And for anyone who keeps up with the news, they should know that at the behest of the Biden administration, Gaggle deliberately chose to censor various content creators, some of whom, like me, were blocked out. Many of them, though, didn't quite get that far. They would just be shadow banned, where they would be removed from the index. They would see their videos demonetized. They wouldn't be recommended even to subscribers. And to a more serious account, they would lock you out of your account. Or they would lock down your channel altogether, which would also eliminate any scheduling. Or they would delete your channel, removing it completely, as well as all your videos. Depending upon how problematic they saw your content. Though it should be noted that my channel was never very large, and I never had a very large audience. And for those who think that it was therefore odd for them to block me out because of that, keep in mind you're thinking like a human. And I honestly don't think a human targeted me. I honestly think the system's Al Gore and his rhythm targeted me. Which means it was making an assessment based as close as I could figure it out on a sort of calculus, where the larger the channel, the more leeway they would give you, especially if you were bringing in revenue and if you were a paid YouTuber, if you paid for the privilege of being on the platform, you would be given even greater leeway still, because ultimately people won't miss the smaller channels if they go dark. And then it was just a matter of time of weeding it out based upon keywords and various other factors. In fact, I strongly suspect that a machine was doing this and not a person, because I actually had my most successful video in my entire channel's history during the lead-in, when I started getting more and more exaggerated in order to hide what I was doing. And the video is an attack on militant atheists, but I modeled it after angry atheist videos. As such, being careful with how the words that I used was chosen, being careful with the tone and inclination, I got to make a video that was castigating atheists, at least the militant variety, whilst to Al Gore and his rhythm, it seemed that I was an atheist attacking religion, because I copied their tone of voice and a lot of their mannerisms, as well as some of the word choices they used. I simply inverted them. And I had over 2,000 views within only a few days, which is better than any of the other videos that I get. And this video is important to note, because I have been informed by an atheist that I was never actually subjected to any form of censor on the ship. Indeed, I was never locked out of my channel. I just don't make good content, and that's why I don't get views and engagement. But I just can't accept that because of my ego, and I start projecting. Of course, this very kind atheist filled with compassion and empathy, as well as logic and reason, who always employs critical thinking, very accurately identified my problem. I was just making bad content, and that's why I didn't get views and engagement. I just interpreted that as Gaggle penalizing me and locking me out of my account because of my ego. It's all been me all along. It all makes perfect sense, really, except for one minor detail. You see, even though my content is bad, and that's the real reason why I wasn't getting views and engagement, my main problem that I was complaining about was the inability to load new content, because Gaggle had prevented me from getting into my account. All of the content that was released on my channel over a 7-month period during that inability to log into my account was scheduled. So I suppose I was locked out of my account because I make bad content that doesn't receive views and doesn't get engagement. But then how did I get back in? After all, even if I were to undergo some radical transformation, really learn how to make great videos, and happened to make the greatest YouTube video the world has ever known, one that somehow miraculously unites all political factions on the left and the right, the atheist and the religious, because atheists are not religious, and that everyone got behind and said was glorious and loved. Being that I was unable to log onto my account to upload it, no one would ever see the video. So how is it that they knew to lift the ban on me logging into my account so that I could download more videos? You see, that's the problem with this narrative. it's very easy for atheists like this to say religious people are projecting their problems onto other people and how it's their ego and they're just making assumptions and have a persecution complex. But in this case, it's rather obvious that what I was saying was actually true. I was locked out of my account. And the reason for locking me out of the account isn't because I violated the terms of service. Although the person also brought that up too, but I'll get to that in a moment. I was blocked out for political reasons. Indeed, this person who came to my channel told me that this just wasn't happening. There's no censorship on Gaggle. There's just none. Religious people like me just think there is because of our persecution complex. The problem, of course, is that the House Judiciary Committee in the United States of America has already announced that this was indeed happening. They have launched an investigation into it, and Gaggle, the actual company, has admitted that they were doing this, that they were indeed censor ownership-ing people. Gaggle admitted it. Gaggle literally admitted it. It's been on several news sites. And I point this out, and I was told the only evidence I had was a partisan political release, a partisan press release. No, I didn't just have a partisan press release. I had a press release from the House Judiciary Committee, which was staffed by people on both sides of the political spectrum, by both Democrats and Republicans. What's more, if you actually go to the House Judiciary Committee site, they also host Gaggle's actual letter admitting that this is what they did. And it has been carried by several major news outlets. Pointing all this out, of course, got me told that even if what I was saying was true, which when a militant atheist says that always means that the religious person, they're humoring the religious person. The religious person is clearly wrong and what they're saying isn't really true, but even if it was true, that wouldn't mean you're right about the ultimate conclusion, and this is exactly the same thing. Even if what I was saying were true, even if Gaggle were censoring conservatives, that wouldn't mean that I was personally subjected to any mistreatment by the company. I was either not really removed at all, and I just have this ego problem that won't allow me to see that my content is bad and not getting views and engagement. Or else I was locked out, but it was because I actually did do something wrong. I violated the terms of service, and I won't admit that because of my egotism. Really, though, it doesn't matter what evidence you show a militant atheist. They have already decided in advance that religion is made up nonsense that delusional people believe in. That they don't have to prove anything because they merely lack belief. So when they call you delusional for believing in God, they don't have the burden of proof to show God doesn't exist, and if they just lack belief. So when they say that your belief in God is utterly false, and that you have been shown evidence that your belief is false, and that you are persisting in a false belief, and that there is something mentally wrong with you that causes you to do this, which is what delusional means. To be delusional means to persist in a false belief even after having been shown evidence that your belief is false. God is a delusion. I, as a religious person, am delusional because I believe in God. Atheists who have no religion because they merely lack belief in gods and the supernatural call me delusional routinely. But not once does the atheist have to present the evidence that I have clearly been shown that proves that God doesn't exist. The atheist merely lacks belief. And if you say otherwise, then you're being dishonest and trying to shift the burden of proof. This particular atheist even had a video. It was the last video they had made at the time of this recording. Or at least, the last video that I had known about them making when I was speaking to them. They may have made other videos since then. about that. How religious people are dishonest. Theists shift the burden of proof. The atheist doesn't claim anything. And I'm getting rather tired of hearing that. You see, I never say that God exists, but I don't have to prove God exists. The burden of proof is not on me. The burden of proof is on the atheist to prove me wrong. That would be shifting the burden of proof. But if the atheist is going to say, as a matter of fact, that all gods that humans have ever worshipped are imaginary, no gods exist, we live in a purely material universe, the supernatural does not exist, and that all religion is false, with an understanding that, by definition, religion requires belief in gods and the supernatural, and that we live in a naturalist, not supernaturalist world, that science and reason supremely prove this, and that anyone who believes in God is delusional, then they do have the burden of proof. You can't just say all religion is false, no gods exist, we live in a material world, and then say you are making no claims and have no burden of proof. It's bad enough we have to accept that in order to be religious, you must believe a god or gods exist, and that atheists who lack belief in gods are not religious, even though they actually are religious. The modern-day atheist movement is really just secular humanism. And even though some of them, like Alex O'Connor, don't like using the word humanism because they've decided that they value animal life equally to human life, when you really look at them, they have all the same beliefs that humanists have. There's no difference between Alex O'Connor and a humanist. And it really doesn't matter, because even if you drop it, you can just say secularist. The whole concept of secularism being the opposite of religion is silly. It's obvious that all of the things that they measure religion by, besides believing in gods and the supernatural, are things that you don't get away from with secularism. For instance, they say religion causes tribalism. Am I honestly supposed to think believing in gods and the supernatural is tribalism, but if you lack belief in gods, you won't be a tribalist? Because atheists are very obviously engaged in tribalist thinking. They very clearly form their own dogmas and doctrines. Not a single atheist that I have ever met is someone who simply lacks belief in a god and nothing else. They always embrace other beliefs, and they always embrace beliefs collectively as a group of atheists. I've never met one that didn't. And it's always from the humanist tradition when it comes to the people going about calling people delusional for believing in the magical skies and everything. They're always progressives politically. The same sort of people who run Gaggle and the tech companies, who admitted to locking people out of their channels. Which brings me to the main problem. You see, I was complaining that atheists like that don't really listen to what you're saying. Without belaboring the point, even though I very obviously could, I'm very verbose. It was about the last 3 or so videos that I had made about militant atheists, where I pointed out that they invaded a Christian channel. They attacked Christians there, and when I responded to them, they didn't actually take the time to respond to what it was I was actually saying. For example, I explained that Jesus was not a false prophet, and the idea that he was a failed apocalyptic prophet who predicted the end times and the second coming within the lifetime of the disciples ignores the fact that in order to make this narrative work, you have to accept that the disciples turned to Jesus and asked him, Jesus, when will your second coming be? 2.5 years before they knew he was going to have a second coming. And how it was obvious that they were talking about the destruction of the temple and the end of the age they were in, because they thought the age they were in was this wicked age, and then the Messiah would come ushering in a new age, and they wanted to know when their age would end, and the Messianic age would begin. They assumed that when Jesus told them the temple would be destroyed, a new age would begin, a new kingdom would begin, and they were asking Jesus that. They were not asking Jesus when his second coming would be, because they had no concept of it. And I said other things, such as how daft it is when atheists try and use the multiverse theory to debunk the first cause argument because it ignores the fact that the whole point of the first cause argument is that God is the first cause of existence, not just the first cause of a universe, which happens to be only one universe in a multiverse. It doesn't just apply to this one universe. And that particular atheist, when asked, he actually said that he did not see why God would be the ultimate objective foundation of morality. Even if God exists, why would he be the objective standard of morality? And I explained to him that it's because God created everything else. God creates the universe and thus how it works. And morality is really living in compliance with natural law and how you were designed to live and what would best prosper you and to make the machinery of the universe work properly. That the laws of nature themselves are an extension of the will of God who created them. And he ignored most of what I said, didn't think about it, asked a stupid question to prove me wrong by saying, well, does that mean if I create a universe, that I would be that universe's objective moral standard? I bet your answer would say no, and you would have to use special pleading to say otherwise. He had not only decided in advance that I would say that, no, it's different for you, and then he even decided that I would have a logical fallacy, that my argument was God had the right to make the moral rules we live by because he created our universe. So if he created a universe, would he have the right to make the moral rules? And he didn't seem to grasp that my point isn't about God having the right to make moral rules for us. It was that God created the system of the universe and how the laws of nature function. And even if we accept that we live in a multiverse with multiple universes in it, God would have ultimately created the multiverse. He didn't just create this one universe. And ultimately, no contingent being is ever going to be free of the laws of nature that define his own existence. So this bloke creating another universe would still be a bloke who created a universe in the context of another universe that operates on natural laws that he has no say over, and that he is ultimately subject to. This isn't special pleading, it's just pointing out that in the classical argument for the existence of God, when they talk about the universe, they're not talking about a universe in a multiverse of many universes, as if God created this one universe but none of the others. God is understood as the ground of being. God is understood as the source of all existence for everything else that exists. And he accused me of the logical fallacy of argument and dictionarium, where I choose a dictionary definition and stick to it even though others are just as valid. Even though applying the definition he was using to my argument fundamentally changes what it was I was saying, I'm the one committing a logical fallacy. And the whole point I was making is that he didn't even try to understand the point I was making. He even pulled that old cobbler out that atheists started about 20 years ago, where theists are described as being stupid because, well, we think God wrote laws that nature obeys. We think the laws of nature are no different than the laws that people write down to regulate behavior in nations. And I was a typical theist. I spoke about the laws of nature as if they were rules things were obeying. And he even informed me that rocks, when you fall because of gravity. They don't fall because they're obeying some God's laws. Because I'm a typical theist, and I thought the laws of nature were actual laws. Of course, I didn't think that. Everyone uses the term laws of nature because it's better than describing using a full paragraph. Things like gravity, strong or weak, electromagnetic force, things like that. It's all nonsense. Strong or weak nuclear force. and electromagnetism, I knew that the laws of nature were not just laws that God wrote down that things obey. I knew that that wasn't what I was saying. And it was obvious he was deliberately depicting me as stupid. And it was obvious that he wasn't trying to understand what it was I was saying. And I pointed that out. I pointed out that the atheist community is full of people who have these self-referential concepts in their minds about what religious people believe. It's invariable that when they talk about religion, they're really just talking about Christianity. And it's obvious that they don't really understand what Christians believe or the arguments for the existence of God. Just like it's obvious that their mere lack of belief and not making any claims nonsense is just fake. And this person trots in and starts blaming me. No possibility that I'm right. I'm wrong. I was just using bog standard apologetics, and they were just responding with reason. And they weren't. It's not rational to bring up the multiverse theory in response to God being the source of all existence. Because if you do that, then you're missing the entire bloody point. Atheists aren't smart by bringing up the multiverse. They're stupid. And it doesn't matter if this other atheist thinks I'm wrong for saying that. This other atheist also thinks I make these videos out of resentment. And that I think emotionally rather than evidentially. Well, I don't make these videos out of resentment. I make them out of amusement. And I think it bizarre that someone who runs an atheist channel where they do nothing but rehash the same old atheist talking points that I've already addressed in my own videos before they actually made their own, in a lot of the cases. Things like how theists are dishonest and they shift the burden of proof on the atheist even though the atheist isn't making any claims. Or attacks on presuppositional apologetics. They don't really know what presuppositional apologetics are, and they don't really understand that not everyone uses them. Things like that. It's all the usual drivel on this person's site. This person does nothing but make videos about how awful and stupid and irrational Christians are, or how stupid religion is and the religious people are. Telling us how their arguments are all based on logical fallacies and how they all have cognitive biases and how they project their problems onto the noble-hearted atheists who are, of course, lawless and innocent. And I find it rather bizarre that an atheist who is running an atheist channel where they do nothing but badmouth Christianity would say that I am the one that's motivated by resentment. Especially considering that while I do talk about atheists on this channel isn't dedicated to talking about atheists. I make other videos that have nothing to do with atheists. The only reason I even talk about atheists this much is because they keep bloody attacking Christians. I don't resent anyone, really. But I run into more militant atheists than I do Christians to talk to on the internet, and they constantly attack me. What am I supposed to do? Keep in mind, one atheist even made a hate video holding me up for ridicule. And that was one of the earliest warning signs I had that I had to be very careful on my channel, because when I made a response video to that person, and a response video that was in kind, I didn't go over the top and become abusive. But my channel was threatened with deletion for hate speech, for responding to something an atheist said about me. It's fairly obvious that atheists have much more of a free hand on the two of you than do Christians, and it is based on this narrative that there is no hate like Christian love, and Christians hate the right-wingers who are going to bring about a Fourth Reich, and that atheists are bastions of rationality and freedom, standing for our rights But we know that that's not really true. Just like we know it's not really true when atheists go on and on and on about how the Soviet Union was actually run by religion and had nothing to do with atheism. If we have to play pretend that atheism is the opposite of religion, then the Soviet Union was an atheist state promoting atheism and rejecting religion. And considering that they even tried getting people interested in university courses in the science of atheism and mocked religion in all of the public schools that they required you to go to, and even had the same suggestions that people like Peter Boghossian had in his manual for creating atheists, like saying, well, fine, according to international conventions, we have to allow freedom of religion. You're free, so long as you limit your behaviors to certain designated areas like worship services or in your home, but you're not allowed to talk about your religion in public, while we're perfectly able to mock your religion in public. It's fairly obvious that atheists haven't really changed since the old Soviet days. And it's equally obvious that all of the talk about religious people having mental problems and projecting their flaws onto atheists and having massive egos, it's all just nonsense. The very fact that I have to talk like this still, or perhaps I don't know. I simply haven't tried speaking normally since I've gotten back. But I am beginning to become more and more normal like I used to be. But the fact of the matter is, whenever atheists gain enough power, they start censoring people whose views disagree with their own. And that's because no one is ever just someone who merely lacks belief in a God. The modern atheist movement is tied to progressivism. It is tied to humanism, and you can't really get rid of that. It's obvious that even people like Alex O'Connor and Drew McCoy are actually embracing humanist principles, and that the Soviet Union and other groups like them were equally based on that, and it always leads inevitably to the same thing. The very fact that they insist that they are not religious creates an us versus them binary, where they can just other people for being religious. And then they talk about all the flaws of religious thinking, how it's based on faith, how it's based on emotion and not reason. All of which others people. I'm not really a deeply emotional person, by the way. I know it may sound odd considering how animated I am in these videos. And I don't just mean the cartoon character that I use to represent me. But large parts of this is performative so that I can help evade Al Gore. If you listen to some of my older videos, I didn't use I always had some pauses, but not as long as I do now. I didn't do the stuttering and all, and I didn't do the flares. All of which was added specifically to avoid a problem that I have here. But therein lies the point. What actual evidence does this atheist have that I'm projecting my problems onto other atheists? That I'm projecting my personal flaws onto Gaggle and atheists? What actual evidence do they have that I'm emotional and not evidential? It's all just presupposition on their own part, which makes the video on their channel about the fallacy of presuppositional apologetics hypocritical, because atheists have presuppositions of their own. Like the bloke who knew that my argument, when he said, well, if God is the objective morals of this universe because he created it, if I created a universe, would I be the objective moral standard of that one? I bet you'll say no, and you'll rely on special pleading to say otherwise. He knew that I would say, no, it's different with you than it is with God, and he knew my argument would be special pleading, because I'm religious, and we religious people always engage in logical fallacies. And in this case, I would say that God created this universe, and therefore he's the objective moral standard, but when he asked about him creating a universe, I'd say, oh, it's different when you do it, and my argument would be special pleading. He he knew it in advance. And he wouldn't listen to what my actual argument was. Because he knows in advance that we religious people rely on logical fallacies. And they always like accusing you of that without really understanding what it is that you're saying. Like when he accused me of this argument ad dictionarium, where I assumed only one dictionary definition was valid. The irony of that accusation was that that's what he was guilty of doing. You see, if I explain the definition I am using in a specific argument, then you don't have the right to apply a different definition. Because if you do apply a different definition, then you are fundamentally changing the nature of the argument that's being made. Turning around and saying that I am committing a logical fallacy of argument ad dictionarium, where I insist only one definition of a word is accurate, is silly. What am I supposed to do? Except, okay, fine, there's more than one definition of the word universe, and you can just apply any of those definitions to my argument. Am I honestly supposed to do that? What's more, is this atheist himself allowing multiple definitions of the argument? Even if I said, fine, yours is valid. There's multiple universes in a multiverse. You're right. Will he ever consider the definition I was actually using originally? Of course not. At that point, the only acceptable definition of the word universe is the one that allows there to be multiple universes in a multiverse. And my argument comes off as silly nonsense, and I'm just a typical religious person who's being irrational. So I either commit the logical fallacy of argument ad dictionarium, or I commit another logical fallacy. But really, argument ad dictionarium isn't committed just because you use a specific definition, and that others should be precluded. Argument ad dictionarium is when you decide someone else's argument must use your definition when it's obvious that they are not using it, which is what he was doing with me. He was actually guilty of what he was accusing me of doing, which is what makes the other person who attacked me on my own channel rather ridiculous. This person who tried to gaslight me into accepting that I hadn't been censored, this person who ignored the fact that I spent 7 months unable to log into my account for no reason other than for politics. This person who ignores the fact that this happened to several people. It's been in the news. Who is telling me that I'm projecting my faults onto others? Is defending this, whilst at the same time telling me that I am motivated, that my entire thought process is emotional and not evidential, that I don't think in terms of looking at the evidence and following what it leads. I think in terms of what feels good to me and what makes my emotions feel validated. And that my entire content, at least when it comes to atheists, is motivated by resentment. Because I'm looking for emotional validation, not reason and evidence. Not like the atheist who runs a YouTube channel who does nothing but attack Christians. Ironically, I've made videos about Christians who I have found fault with, such as David Barton, or one of David Barton's hangers-on, Jack Hibbs. I have been critical of certain Christian points of view. What's more, I've made videos that have nothing whatsoever to do with a criticism of other people. I've made holiday announcements and addresses. I have made videos where I do nothing but read the Bible. I have made videos where I discuss what religion is and what the nature of religion is. I have made videos where I discuss politics or read poetry. And while I did let my channel slide several times, and after my house burned down, I didn't make videos for 5 years, the fact of the matter is, even upon my return, I have not been fixated on atheists. And yet this person who is telling me that I am motivated by resentment has done nothing but make a channel dedicated to how awful and stupid and irrational Christians are, which they will of course say, religious people, instead of Christians, where they are really trying to listen to what Christians have to say and responding to it in an intelligent way. They are simply repeating the claims that they got from the atheist echo chamber. And I'm the one that's motivated by resentment. This is what makes it rather absurd when you think about it. Of course, that's the trick, isn't it, when you think about it? Because, let's face reality, atheists these days don't think about anything. They're irrational. They like pretending they're Vulcans from Star Trek who have complete control over their emotions and who think about everything only logically, when in reality they're emotional wrecks who delight in tearing others down. That's the entire point. But then in lies the actual point that I'm making. You see, the real reason I make this content isn't resentment. I make this content because, well, it does amuse me. And the biggest problem that I have with people who are in the holy religion of atheism is that they keep denying that they have a religion. They don't listen to me while I explain they have a religion. They just say I'm calling atheism a religion and then make fun of that. And at the end of the day, the atheist community has succeeded since the new atheism in redefining atheism as a lack of belief in a god and creating this secular versus religious, where atheists are not religious, duality, which ultimately prevents us from being honest with what's going on in the world. The atheist mythology, where religion is based on faith, not reason, and that atheists are logical and rational, has certainly suffered a dramatic breaking in recent years. People don't really think of atheists as particularly rational outside of the militant atheist community. Even other atheists who are not militant atheists realize that atheists are just as capable of groupthink and just as capable of irrational beliefs and arbitrary standards and irrational hatreds. But we still allow ourselves to see atheism as the opposite of religion, as faith as belief without evidence, as atheism as a lack of belief in a god, and we don't question that narrative, but it is largely a narrative that prevents analyses not only of the specific talks between atheism and religion, but in the broader world with its implications. And I find that very important, and that's why I would like to address it. I also am fascinated by the psychology. I am getting a psychology degree after all. And one of the greatest benefits of studying militant atheism is that precisely because they've conned themselves into thinking that atheism is just a lack of belief in a god, that they're not making claims, they have no burden of proof, they've created an entire culture where they are critical of religion, where in a debate they can attack, but they never have to defend a position because they have no position to defend, while simultaneously insisting that theirs is the default position. So we're supposed to play by these rules where the Christian they're debating, or the religious person they're debating, states their beliefs and then defends it whilst the atheist attacks it. And there's never a reversal where the religious person is allowed to attack the atheist. The atheist is a great big nothing burger. They just lack belief while they attack you. And this has allowed them to develop a mythology and a narrative and an in-group, out-group bias and all of the same things that they complain about in religion, whilst insisting they haven't actually done that. And because they don't admit that they have doctrines and dogmas and groupthink and cultural identities, they never subject their own beliefs to any sort of scrutiny. Because they're too busy telling us they have no beliefs too subject to scrutiny. They just lack belief. So you have this unfiltered view of the human mind, and it's rather like putting these flaws of human thinking under a microscope and growing it so that you can see it in crystal clarity. They allow you to see that, because to some extent these flaws exist in everyone. They don't just exist in militant atheists. But with militant atheists, you get a rare opportunity to see it writ large. And that's really one of the reasons I'm fascinated by it. But I'm still not obsessed to the point where it's the only thing I talk about. Although if I do talk about it, I usually make 3 videos about the same topic, because I can't be guaranteed that the tube of you will allow me to post any of them, much less one of them. And quite often, when I try posting on this topic, I'll only get 1 or 2 of them through rather than all 3. It's gotten better since I've gotten back on the tube of you, and I may discontinue this practice of doing 3 versions of the same video, but I haven't just yet. And I have 1 more video to make on this topic, but not right just now. For now, I shall take my leave of you. But thank you, God bless, and goodbye.